afternoon, everyone. I call to order this meeting of the Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. And I'll look to Dr. Cottle to provide the Land Acknowledgement.
Thanks, Mayor Krauser. I'll simply start this meeting by acknowledging, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I want to acknowledge and appreciate that I live and work and play in the heart of Treaty 7 territory of southern Alberta. This land, as we know, is home to the Blackfoot Confederacy, consisting of the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and our most adjacent and very valued Indigenous neighbors, the Stoney Nakoda Nation, comprised of the Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Chiniki First Nations. And we are also located in the Rocky Métis District 4 within the Battle River Territory. We start these meetings with the land acknowledgements to acknowledge that we are all treaty people. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll now turn to the approval of the agenda. Any changes? Not seeing any, so I move approval of the agenda for February 17th, 2026, Committee of the Whole meeting as presented. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Looking to the minutes from January 20th, any errors or omissions that anyone noticed? Seeing none, I'll move approval of the minutes of the January 20th, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting as presented. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, on to our staff reports. So the first one is a wildfire and social vulnerability map. Oh, we got the Caitlin show. Ms. Miller and Ms. Van Call, welcome. And whenever you're ready, the microphone is yours.
It'll catch up. All right, perfect. Well, good afternoon, Mayor Krauser and Council. My name is Caitlin Van Gaal. I am the Supervisor of Environment Sustainability here at the Town of Canmore. And I'm joined today with Caitlin Miller, Manager of Protective Services and Director of Emergency Management, to present to you on the wildfire and social vulnerability map. It was a joint project between our two departments, as well as with Devin Bartley in GIS and IT, and Cathro Consulting, who was our external party who helped develop this map. Through this presentation, we'll give you a brief background on the project. I'll then hand it over to Ms. Miller, who will talk about the data sources that went into the development of the map. I will then take you through a brief demo of how the map works, and then we'll hand it back to Ms. Miller for the implementation next steps, and then open it up for questions. So firstly, as you may know, and I'm sure you're well aware, wildfire is our top risk and hazard as identified through the Hazard Identification Risk Assessment document, which is managed by our Emergency Management Agency and has been identified as our top climate hazard, so it's only expected to get worse as we move into further climate scenarios, as identified in our Climate Emergency Action Plan that was adopted by Council last year, I guess 2 years ago now, 2024. And so, as wildfire is our top hazard, the municipality has been doing a lot of work to mitigate this risk, much of which falls under the purview of Ms. Miller. So I'm going to hand it over to her to speak a bit about the actions we've taken to date, and then move into explaining the map.
Thank you, Ms. Van Gaal. So we have completed a lot of work to minimize the risk and the impact of wildfire. And we've had a couple of different, I'm really struggling with this, hang on. There we go. We've had a number of different projects that have been supported, and a lot of them led by the wildfire mitigation strategy. And we last updated that in 2018, and we've been slowly going through those recommendations. It does a good analysis of what the wildfire risk is and where the impact is on structures and where we're most vulnerable from a fuel perspective, and really studies makes recommendations across the 7 disciplines of Fire Smart to have a fulsome mitigation strategy. We've done a number of Fire Smart home assessments over the years. Those are free through the fire department, and they remain free. And we've seen a massive uptake in the past couple of years with how many people are getting this service. That's also led us into our neighborhood recognition program, where we are moving beyond the individual into the community neighborhood level mitigation. And we've also done emergency response plans for wildfire smoke, which sets the trigger and also helps us understand the vulnerability to wildfire smoke. We've done a number of fuel reduction projects with vegetation management from a Fire Smart perspective, and of course the Bow Valley Community Fire Guard. We've been leading that work as well. It's an interjurisdictional project because we know that wildfire knows no boundaries, so we're going beyond our own municipal boundaries and looking at protecting our community by involving the surrounding jurisdictions as well. And we've also done a municipal document review, and we came last year. We're in 2026 now. And we presented some of the recommendations and findings, and we've been working through those recommendations and findings. A lot of these projects are funded through FRIA, through the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta, and we're very fortunate and grateful that we continue to get that support because a lot of this work is really important work, and it's nice to have the funding come from the grant funding. And one of those grant-funded projects is also our Regional Fire Smart Coordinator, who is now going to be leading a lot of the work, especially if it has that Fire Smart lens on it. So when we were doing the Fire Smart Municipal Document Review, we realized that we really needed to better understand the community's social vulnerability to the impacts of wildfire. So traditionally, wildfire exposure and vulnerability maps focus on critical infrastructure and structures, often focusing on the higher value structures as priority areas, and it's really good at helping us understand where to remove vegetation that can act as fuel. But understanding community vulnerability at the individual or more social level is not something that has often been mapped out in relation to wildfire resilience. So to make informed decisions and better understand the community's vulnerability at a more holistic level, we decided to use some of the Climate Emergency Action Plan implementation funding towards a wildfire and social vulnerability map. And I will just add that this is something that had not really previously been done anywhere in Western Canada, because every consultant we talked to was like, this is a really exciting project. We don't quite know what we're going to do, and we ended up with Cathro Consulting, who did a really great job. So our main goal is to continue to build community resilience to wildfire risk by identifying areas of the community that are more vulnerable to this type of hazard. So we know that disasters disproportionately impact community members based on a variety of demographic, social, or financial factors. This map will provide administration with a visual representation of wildfire risk and social vulnerability, which helps identify areas that different types of mitigation or resilience programming may be beneficial. This map will also help prioritize different wildfire risk reduction efforts, such as focusing on priority areas for the Neighborhood Recognition Program, hazardous tree removal prioritization, targeted education and social programming, and incentive delivery. So this map is going to be a very useful tool for our Regional Fire Smart Coordinator as they look for more opportunities to continue to improve Canmore's resilience to wildfire. So the wildfire and social vulnerability map, we've pulled data from a variety of sources to make sure that there's a holistic picture of how the risk of wildfire impacts the community. Working with the Community and Social Development Department, we pulled social vulnerability data for our map and made sure to include a number of different factors. This included data like where there are higher proportions of people who are 65 and older living in town, where we have a lot of tourist homes and visitor accommodations, where we have known employee housing, and where there are larger proportions of primary residence and secondary residences. This type of information helps us assess the varying degrees of social vulnerability or understanding what type of education or programming would be appropriate in what areas. We also looked at the physical vulnerability of the structures throughout town, and this included mapping not only combustible roofs, but the average age of buildings and what the scores from our previous Fire Smart home assessments were. And again, we had a lot of really good data to help support these aspects due to the number of Fire Smart home assessments that we've done over the past few years. It's been really helpful in understanding where there's a little more work to be done and where we can follow up. And lastly, we look at the actual wildfire risk by using our maps for wildfire fuel, behavior, potential, and the ember cast exposures for both short and long ranges. So we need to remember it's not just the trees immediately adjacent to properties that pose risk, but how far those embers can be transported once they land, and do they have anything combustible to help them catch fire? So now we're going to do a little dance that we choreographed earlier, where Ms. Van Gaal is going to show you the social vulnerability map.
Let's get plugged in here. Perfect. So as you can see here, this is the sort of the base map of what it looks like when you open this up. This is all in ArcGIS Online, but we are working with our GIS advisor to have this transported over into our internal GIS system. And so we have a base map of the municipality. There's several different features that you can use to measure, draw, print from this map. And then there's a quick help guide to show folks how to use the map, where you can toggle through all the different directions and what you can expect to see. And then on the right-hand side, we have different layers of the map that we can then toggle on. So within the reference layer, there's items such as wildfire fuel potential, which is a map that was pulled from a previous study done within our fire services and under the Emergency Management Agency. We can toggle on where home assessments were completed, fire smart home assessments, where the neighborhood recognition program is, and then various infrastructure, so critical infrastructure that may be important to understand when looking at the community as a whole. And then we have the social vulnerability layers. And so there's social vulnerability, physical vulnerability, and wildfire risk. So Ms. Miller spoke briefly to those earlier, but I'll just turn some on here. So looking at social vulnerability in proportion of residents that are 55 plus, it breaks it down by neighborhood, and then you can click on each neighborhood, and it gives you a bit more information about what you can expect or what the data has shown about that neighborhood for proportion of residents over 65, and where the data source is. So then you can see here within the table, 16.47% of this population within this neighborhood is over the age of 65. It's ranked 32 out of 33 neighborhoods for vulnerability, etc. And so there's a few different items we can toggle on. I think another one that's kind of interesting, we had talked about proportion of primary residents. So where are the majority of our primary residents living? That increases vulnerability because that's their main home. Employee housing is another vulnerability that we looked at as well within the community. And so if I just toggle that social off and we look at physical vulnerability, we're looking at things such as the average building age within a neighborhood, proportion of combustible roofs, and this is based on a survey that was done a little while ago, completed fire smart home assessments, and then the average score of your fire smart home assessment by neighborhood. We also have then just straight wildfire risk based on fuel load. So we have the embercast exposure, short-term and long-term, or long range and short range, as you can see here, and then wildfire fuel behavior potential. We also have some summary data that was done. So if you combine the social vulnerability scores and look at it over the community, it looks like something like this, and this is if everything's weighted equally, so we can go in and change in the background to weight certain factors more heavily, but right now what we're showing is an equal weighting between all factors. And then the other thing that's a little interesting about how we did this map is we applied a hexagon to it, and this allows us to break down communities in a bit more detail. So if you're looking for, at a smaller scale, the risk or the vulnerability to an area, we can look at it at that. It's at that scale. This is not a perfect system or model, but it is. It's a different approach and something that was kind of unique and can come into play when we're doing our internal prioritization. And I think that's probably all I would think we need to share there. So I'm going to hand it back to Ms. Miller, and then we can open it up to questions. Thanks.
Okay. So as we mentioned, the next steps of this project are to integrate it into our internal GIS system, and then we'll be sharing with internal staff who focus on wildfire risk reduction work in order for them to use it and be informed. So some of the ways that we're going to use this information are to prioritize programs, again, focus on where and what type of education and outreach we should focus on, help us prioritize our neighborhood recognition program participants, and where we should focus programs to incentivize behavior change, and lastly, where we should focus our social programming. So all of this information will ultimately help us focus our efforts on increasing Canmore's resilience to wildfire. Now, to keep the data useful, we also have plans to update the maps on an ongoing basis as information becomes available, and then doing a larger update and review every 5 years to make sure that the data still makes sense and we're not missing any data. And again, the smaller reviews can be done internally because we'll have it integrated into our internal system, and then we can make a decision in 5 years as to if we need some external help for that or if we can update and do a review ourselves. And so as I mentioned, I know our regional Fire Smart coordinator is keen to dig into the data, but as are members of our internal wildfire risk reduction working group, which includes members from the fire, communications, planning and development, engineering, parks, public works, facilities, environment and sustainability, and protective services departments. So we all work together to make sure we have a wholesome program. Any questions?
Great, well, thank you very much for that presentation. Very cool tool. And I imagine we don't even know the full extent that it can be useful yet until it's, you dig into it. But thank you for that. I do have a quick question about when it's updated. Is that, now that it's built, is that something that we can do internally, or I'm seeing nods, so yes, we can do that internally. That's good, so we don't need to bring in a consultant every time. Okay, great. Okay, Councillor Marin.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very neat to see, and I love how interactive it is. Just some of the data, like I noticed, for example, one of the layers is recent immigration households. So did that, like, where did the bulk of the information come from as far as the social aspect, or was it from a number of sources?
It did come from a number of different sources, so a lot from Stats Canada, so it's only as good as our most recent census, which I think is partially why we want to do this update, kind of a bigger update every 5 years or so. We also got a lot of data from our tax sources, our tax data. We talked to community social development and a lot of their community partners who house this information within there, because that's the clientele that they serve.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
pretty
great.
much
Just
it.
because I know it's difficult to find statistics like that are recent and updated regularly. So I was just wondering if it was from just Stats Canada, if there was other inputs. So thank you.
Yeah, and we're fortunate where our GIS team, we have subscriptions through Esri. So when there's new data available through there, that's where some of those data sources can come from as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. Technology is really neat. That map is really cool. That's a ton of data. My question is actually about the neighborhood recognition program. I'm curious what kind of buy-in we've had so far, because I think the neighborhood Fire Smart efforts are also really amazing.
Yeah, so it's a relatively new program for Canmore, but it's an old program for Fire Smart. So once we had enough people that were interested in the Fire Smart home assessments, and we were starting to see them come back time and time again and get really curious about what else they could do, we just had conversations with some folks, and started up in Peaks of Grassy actually, where just a few of them were emailing me and wanted to know what more the town could do. And I was like, well, we're doing a lot, but what can you do? And a lot of community resilience comes with making those community connections and talking to your neighbors. And that's really what the neighborhood recognition program aims to do, is to get community members talking to each other, working together, and working together towards a common goal of wildfire resilience. So they started doing that, and Peaks of Grassy is huge, but they had people from all over the neighborhood wanting to get together. The neighborhood recognition program only goes up to 50 dwelling units, so they actually broke out into 6 different communities within that community. So really interesting. They became quite passionate about it. They have a lot of really great ideas. We hired one of the champions as our Fire Smart coordinator because we got them so impassioned, and it all started with just asking what they could do to create more resilience in their own community immediately for themselves and their neighbors. We all get that question about, well, if I do my roof, what about my neighbor's roof? Or if I fire smart my deck, what about my neighbor's deck? And this kind of gives people more of a chance to work together instead of pointing fingers and blame as to what people aren't doing. So it's really awesome. They've even been able to get some group discounts on things to make their community more wildfire resilient. It's been really successful so far. So we strongly encourage anybody who has a couple of neighbors that are interested in becoming more wildfire resilient, talking to them and starting their own wildfire or neighborhood recognition program.
So other than the Peaks of Grassy, are there other neighborhoods that have jumped on board then?
Yeah, so we have some in, Larch, up in Silvertip. There's actually 2 areas in Silvertip that do have folks in the neighborhood recognition program. Just down the block here, Spring Creek Gardens is another one. And in Stewart Creek, we have one that's just started. And Mr. Thompson from the Biosphere Institute is really trying to lead the charge and talk to people about how he's a Fire Smart neighborhood recognition program champion. And he's trying hard to lead the way. So those community leaders that are out there kind of talking about it for free are really helping us get the word out as well.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Looking to see if there are any other questions. Councillor Graham.
Somebody asked me today if they could get their Fire Smart assessment done, and they were saying they couldn't get it done until spring, correct?
Yeah, we need to be able to see the ground.
The ground, yep.
So when there's snow cover, it's not an easy thing for us to assess. We need to look at the roof, the deck, what's on the ground, what the vegetation looks like, where there might be little nooks and crannies that pieces can fall into. So it is best done in the spring once there's clear ground for the assessors to look at.
Up until today.
Yeah, we might have been able to squeak a few in last week, but
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Other questions? I'm not seeing any. So thank you very much for bringing this to us to take a look at. Very interesting, and it's interesting that we're also leading the way on this in Western Canada at least. So excellent. So thank you very much for your work, and have a good rest of the day. We will now move on to the next item, which I believe we are going to be hearing from through Zoom. I believe Ms. Heaton plus Mr. Weldon is joining us by Zoom.
Hello, can you hear or
Hello.
see me?
Ms. Heaton, welcome. We're just working to get the screen to change over to so we can see you. Oh, now it's, there we go. Okay, and you can hear me fine?
I can hear you,
Yeah, and we can
but
hear.
I'm not able to share my screen. Briar, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yes, you're going to have to, when you click share, I believe you have to take over the content. It just wasn't letting me switch the video view without sharing.
Oh, it says that someone else is sharing and the host isn't allowing multiple presenters for this meeting.
Okay, I will stop sharing.
Thank you.
Try again.
Excellent. All right, well, welcome, and we look forward to hearing about people, places, and pathways.
Excellent. Well, hello, Mayor and Council. My apologies that I'm not able to be there in person. I'm a little under the weather today, so thank you for being accommodating. I have met all of you, I believe, but for our newer councillors, my name is Caroline Hayden, and I am here from our communications team, and we also lead public engagement for the organization. And I'm very excited to tell you about something that we've been working on for a few months now, a new initiative for engagement for the 2026 year that we are calling People, Places, and Pathways. So during today's brief presentation, I'm going to do a quick refresh of the role of engagement within the organization. And then I'll give a little teaser of the engagement work to come this year, as we have a series of major guiding documents that are going out for public input this year. And then I'll walk you through what our approach to engagement is going to be, so you know what to expect and the community knows what to expect. We'll go over key dates and activities, and then we'll wrap up with ways that the community can be involved in the weeks to come. So as you know, public engagement goes by a number of different names: public input, public participation, whatever you call it. Making the community feel heard is a shared priority, both for administration and for council, as outlined in your strategic plan. And through that, we really want to ensure that the community feels heard in the decisions that impact them and feel seen in the work that we do. So we, on major projects, invite the public to provide input. And typically this occurs on a project by project basis. And that allows us to tailor our approach to engagement to match the audience needs and really tailor it to the scope of the decision at hand. And it's just so happened that these more major engagement touchpoints have been staggered throughout the year just by virtue of capital project timelines. And as we invite the community to be involved in decision making, we, especially over the past few years, have been experimenting with new ways to bring the community into the work that we do and into the democratic process. So we have been using a combination of both more traditional type of input opportunities and really trying to push the envelope for what public engagement can look like by integrating new creative approaches to our work. So that includes curated events. So for example, the warm-up that we developed in partnership with the Canmore Folk Music Festival to support a large-scale planning process for the downtown ARP. And it resulted in now a festival that lives on its own. It just ran this past Friday, its third year. And it was the first year that there was not a public engagement element attached to it. So it's pretty exciting to see a living legacy of our community engagement work out in the community. Then we also go out into the community to where people actually are, instead of always inviting them to come to us, because that can be burdensome. So we call those pop-ups. So you might see us at popular community locations such as Elevation Place or the community market. Or recently we held a pop-up up at the Nordic Center to raise awareness about the fire guard work with trail users in the area. We've also gone into the classroom to bring youth and high schoolers into activities that directly provide input to engagement. And then some more familiar type of input opportunities, such as workshops. Obviously, surveys are a popular one. And for statutory plans, including a public hearing. So as you know, when council is faced with making a decision, either to approve policy or major plans or bylaws, there's a lot at play. So as much as I just really reinforced the important role that engagement does play in decision making, it is important to remember that it is one of many inputs that council considers as part of decision making. So that includes referring to existing strategic plans, respecting legislation, performing risk analysis, taking advice from administration. Then really considering what the impact to community is, and if different decisions could meet community needs, and how that balances in budgetary conversations. But now turning to what the public input elements are going to look like, we have an interesting opportunity at hand this year. Because unlike how I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, where it's just kind of happens that plans are more staggered, we actually have three major guiding documents that are following generally the same timeline. And these have all been before you, so this is not new news. We have the Open Spaces and Trails Plan. So we are looking to integrate and update the existing plans. So we have the Open Spaces Design Guidelines and the Open Spaces and Trails Plan into one comprehensive document. And that will give us an opportunity to understand how we can expand and enhance these spaces for the community to enjoy into the future. Then we have the Integrated Transportation Plan, which has not been updated since 2018. So we're going to be updating that plan to reflect our new context since then. So we have updated growth numbers, new policies, evolving community needs, and we have really exciting progress to reflect as well that we've made on the existing plan to date. And finally, we are undertaking a full rewrite of the land use bylaw to create a clearer and more user-friendly bylaw that is the major guiding document for how we develop and build in the community, and doing so in a way that aligns with community priorities and character. And this doesn't include all of the more micro milestones in these projects, but just to give you a sense of how these projects are aligning in terms of key milestones. All projects are going out for public input this quarter. And then in quarter two, we'll be taking that input away to continue developing and refining content, with the aim of going back out to the public in quarter three with either a draft plan for input or draft content for review. And then for the Open Spaces Plan and the Integrated Transportation Plan, they're more closely aligned in terms of timeline. So they're both hoping to go to council for review and approval later this year or early next quarter. Whereas the land use bylaw is a longer running project. So we're not expecting that one to go to council for bylaw review until late 2027 or early 2028. So given this opportunity of alignment, we have decided to pull obviously these are all standalone projects, but we're pulling the public engagement elements together under a single umbrella that we are calling People, Places, and Pathways. So how we are doing that is, while the actual plan or bylaw development will be undertaken by the independent teams in their respective departments, we are going to be bundling the engagement timeline as well as the communications to support that work to the community, instead of treating them all as separate engagement opportunities with their own campaigns behind them. So what we're trying to do there is multiple fold. So partially let's reduce what we call engagement fatigue. Instead of asking the public to come out to this thing and then that thing, we can do more of a one-stop shop and make it just more efficient for the community to use our residents' time more wisely, and also our teams as well. And just to make it easier to participate. And by pulling all those projects together, you might have a resident who would have contributed just to the Open Spaces Plan and not to the others. but by making those opportunities seamless, we're hoping we can encourage community members to participate in one or all of the plans that are open for input. And it really makes sense for these projects in particular, because they all are these high-level plans that speak to how we move, play, and build here in Canmore over the long term. And by linking engagement opportunities together, it's also of benefit to the project development as well, because they'll be able to share insights gained, reduce redundancy between what we're asking of the public, and be able to apply those learnings across multiple projects. And of course, as I mentioned, they're all on the same timeline, so it just makes sense logistically as well. So here's how the major engagement phases are planning out. So there are, of course, nuances between the projects, so I'm summarizing here. But for this first phase of engagement that we're expecting to launch mid-March, and it will run through mid-April, the projects in general are looking to understand current conditions and public experiences. So understanding what's working well, what's not, what could be improved, as well as affirming community values, priorities, and aspirations for the future. So it's really more of a blue sky opportunity. Whereas the phase 2, that we're expecting to go to the public later in August or in September, the teams will be coming back with draft plans or content that's tangible for public input. And that is really a verification to ensure that the draft plans are addressing as best as they can the identified gaps, opportunities, and priorities that we heard during the first phase of engagement. And then we have the final phase where teams will be sharing the final bylaw or plans, and will go before council. And there will only be one of these projects that will have a public hearing associated with it, and that is the land use bylaw as required. So here's what engagement is going to look like for this quarter. So we're going to be kicking off engagement on March 17th with 3 surveys. Each project has their own surveys, and that lives on our public engagement site called mycanmore.ca. And again, as I mentioned, this is trying to understand those current experiences, future aspirations. And for each survey that the public takes, they'll be entered to win a $100 gift certificate to a local business of their choice. And so you can triple your odds if you take all 3 surveys while you are on our engagement platform. Then later that month, we're inviting the community to have lunch with us during the week of March 23rd. We will have 3 back-to-back webinars, and that's a chance for the community to hear from the project teams, to get some more context, and then the teams will be there to answer questions as well. And then later in the course of engagement, we'll have a series of events. So our main flagship event is our Community Information Night. That's happening on April 13th from 5 to 8 p.m., 5:30 to 8 p.m. And we're going to be set up at the Canmore Brewing Company. This is a family-friendly venue, and we're inviting the community to come by, chat with the teams, participate in some hands-on input activities, and maybe enjoy a beverage. And then we'll be inviting interest holders across all of our projects for a single in-person workshop later that week. And then we may also be out and about in the community, as I mentioned, at those high visibility locations. Then our second phase of engagement is farther away, so it's not as fleshed out yet, but this is what to expect. Because things are a bit more baked in once we get to the draft plan stage, the engagement's more on the limited side, but we will again have that combination of both in-person and virtual opportunities. So we'll be going out again with a series of surveys, webinars, and then we will be inviting the community to a barbecue. So it's to create an event that people want to come to to have a chat about trails and pathways over a burger. We're also going to be looking to include youth as well. And given that it will be warm and more during the tail end of summer, we'll be out and about in the community as well. So for all of our open public input opportunities, they live on mycanmore.ca. So all of our pages went live today. So this is where you can find more information about all of the individual projects. You can also sign up for updates. So you'll get notified of upcoming changes. And you can also read any of our background information there, and as well as review the upcoming engagement opportunity dates. So that is places, people, places, and pathways in a nutshell. I'm happy to take questions with the caveat that I am not a subject matter expert. So if there are more technical questions about the projects themselves, there are in-person representatives from each of them. So we'll look to them for assistance. But if there are any questions or comments regarding the engagement or communication side, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hayden, and appreciate you walking through all of these projects and this opportunity to do them again. It's very exciting. There's a number of councillors that have questions, so we'll get right to them. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Ms. Heaton. I'm super excited about this. I don't know what screen to look at for you here today. I'm really excited about this this process and combining these all together. I think this is a really great use of not only our time but the community's time as well. And these projects interlink so closely that I think that's very wise. The land use bylaw will get a public hearing and people's official formal input back to council on that one. But I'm wondering what will come back to council for the ITP and the open spaces reports. Will we get some sort of what you heard report or something along those lines?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Councillor Graham. As per our standard protocol for engagement, following each phase of engagement, we'll be releasing a what we heard report per project. So you'll have two touch base opportunities following those two engagement periods where we will report back to you what we heard from the community.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Councillor, Ms. Smithers, did you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to add that the Open Space and Trails Plan and the ITP, the Integrated Transportation Plan, are both non-statutory documents, so they would be coming to council for approval. So the difference there is the land use bylaw being statutory requires the public hearing of council. So they will be coming to council, all three documents for approval, just different routes to get there.
Okay. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert, and thank you, Ms. Hayden, for your presentation. First of all, I wanted to say I was one of the hosts at the warm-up over this past weekend. Yes, it's not very often that a municipal public engagement piece turns into an annual sold-out cultural event. So I hope you and everyone involved in creating that initially are really proud of sort of this really positive thing that this has become here in our community. So my question is around just the communication strategy. Like, for example, well, I am a big fan of the efficiency of combining 3 in 1 here. You know, integrated transportation plan, on the surface, that name doesn't really sound super exciting, but it's really something that involves things that everyone has an opinion about, getting from A to B and that sort of thing. So how are you communicating with people that, you know, this is why you should engage here, you do care about this stuff, even if the names of the plans are a little bit dry?
Wonderful question, and thank you for the kudos on the warm-up. We are all certainly very proud, and it was wonderful to be there as a participant this year. I did not go over the communications aspect of our approach, but in addition to those engagement opportunities, we will be doing a widespread communications campaign that will include those calls to action of helping people understand in simple terms what each of those plans are hoping to achieve and why it's important for people to be involved, especially with those those plans that are very top of mind for community members. So you should expect to see high visibility signage. So we'll be deploying our timber frame signs around the community. We're also going to be experimenting with new types of signage to reach people who may not be following us regularly. Then we will have a social media paid campaign in addition to our standard posts. And we, excitingly, as you know, launched Instagram, so we are going to be integrating some video content as well, and going out into community, doing some short little interviews, and posting them during the engagement period to, again, help the community see themselves in the work, and encourage them to share their own voices. Then we'll have content on our web platform, so a blog. We'll also be doing a media release as well. So the word will be certainly out there, and we're trying as best as we can to keep the tone as conversational and as easy to understand and as approachable as possible to invite new audiences into the process.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Marin.
Thank you for your presentation and all the details. My first question was just answered, so thank you to Councillor Murray for asking that. I just had a question about the webinars. So I noticed that there are 3 kind of back-to-back in 1 week, and I was wondering if there was any consideration given to spreading those out, because people might be, I mean, there are 3 different topics. So I'm wondering if people might be interested in attending all 3, but might not be available to attend 3 in a row kind of thing. And maybe consideration was given to that, but I just noticed that might be difficult for some people to attend 3 back-to-back.
Thank you, Councilor, for the question. We did consider spacing those out, but another consideration that we were working around was the spring break. So we didn't want to host anything during that time period, which stretches about 2 weeks during that engagement period, just in case people would plan to be away. But if you can't make it to one or all of the webinars, as we always do, we will be recording them and sharing them on each of those project pages. And they will be there throughout the engagement process. So if anyone's not able to attend, they'll certainly still be able to tune in and watch the re-record. And there's information as well on how to get in touch with us on those project pages. If people have questions that they felt weren't answered during the webinar, they're more than welcome to get in touch with our teams directly.
Great, thank you very much for the clarification.
Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Hayden, for the presentation. I was hosting at the Miners Hall, and I heard great things about you from at the venue that you played at, so great job. I think one of the neat things about this whole idea is we're working smarter, not harder, by putting a whole bunch of engagement pieces at a similar time frame. In your opinion, what is the capacity of the community for how much public engagement they can do? Because I'm assuming we're doing this under the assumption that we need a bit of a break before the next wave of engagement or whatever topic. So in your opinion, how does that work? Like, what's the public's capacity?
That's a great question. Hard to answer. We're operating under the philosophy, as you mentioned, to work smarter, not harder, and to use the community's time as wisely as possible. So by group, this is an experiment for us. We haven't had the opportunity to group not shared projects, but overlapping projects that speak to each other. So this will be an experiment for us, and we'll also be looking for, as we interact with the public during engagement, looking to do a bit of a touch base to see like how well is it working, and is this something that we should continue in the future? We may not be in this position in the future, so it could. We will. It's kind of a wait and see, but we're just trying to be as efficient and as respectful as possible with people's time.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a social capacity to the whole thing, which I'm really curious to see as we figure out as we go through the process. You know, I think sometimes like people if there's like a big thing to engage upon, they can do that, but then it's like there's that sort of window of time of how many weeks or months before people can be motivated for the next thing. And so it'd be great to just keep our eye on this and see how that works out. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for all of those answers and the great presentation. look forward to seeing this unfold. I don't see any other questions here, so thank you very much, and I hope you're feeling better soon.
Thank you very much and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Okay, so we will move on to item E1, Councillor updates. I'll just open it up to the committee to ask any questions with regards to any of those updates. Give you a moment to flip through before going on to the next. Okay, so seeing none, let's move to the administrative updates. F1, starting at page 33. Are there any questions around the corporate strategic team section, section A? Seeing none, we'll go to section B, municipal services. Section C, corporate services. Or D, municipal infrastructure. Okay, seeing none. Looking at the council resolution action list, you see that there's a few things that will be falling off there because they're completed. Any other questions or anything that arises from the resolution action list? All right, so that brings us to the end of our meeting. And I will now move that we adjourn.